All right, what's going on, y'all? So today I want to talk about a widespread issue affecting so many people of, frankly, extreme coping and justification. This is something that I've struggled with and still struggle with certain things today. And so I want to make the caveat before we get into this that, I'm going to share some personal issues and struggles I've had. And while these were negatives for me, they might actually be beneficial to you. So while something might have been wrong for me, I'm not telling it's necessarily wrong for you, but I want to make that caveat before we get into it. So before we get into the whole kind of justification coping I'm talking about, I want to use examples I've seen within my own comments. So you guys know that I retired from pro bodybuilding a couple years ago. When I gave my life to Christ, I stopped cycling steroids, but I stayed on testosterone replacement therapy, TRT. And during the course of the 2 years following, I really heavily felt deep within my gut that there was something wrong with it. Even though logically it made sense to stay on. After years of being on steroids and TRT, my natural ability to produce testosterone was heavily suppressed. With all the hormone disruptors in our food supply and what's in our water. It's heavily marketed now to men of all ages to get on TRT to protect their testosterone. But even with all that, with all the kind of logical justifications I made, something always felt off with TRT. And logically, there was an argument I was able to play in my head of, why this could be. Why does it feel off? Take fasting, for example. I place a huge importance on fasting. And with fasting, there's an acute drop in testosterone hormones that creates a softening effect. If you constantly have your testosterone elevated and naturally testosterone cycles throughout the day, if you constantly have it elevated and static, your sympathetic nervous system is upregulated constantly a little bit. Your dopamine and serotonin is upregulated constantly a little bit. So over time, this can create mood changes, personality changes in some people. And so, through all of this, I was making justifications on why I should stay on TRT. It can be healthy for me. My blood work looked great, but something deep within my gut, something spiritually fell off with it. And I had heard from other people that, they were experiencing some of the same. So, I went ahead and made an attempt to come off of TRT. But I still played with the justification in my head and tried to, frankly, cope with, all of the reasons why I should be on. And I ended up failing that attempt at coming off. But even then, I made the justification of, I'm in my 30s now. Many men my age are getting on. It's popular to be on. We need it, because of what's in our environment. And I still felt like something in my gut was off. I felt like it was affecting my spiritual life in some way. Logically, my mind was telling me one thing, but my heart was telling me another. So I ended up going ahead in the second attempt, giving complete trust in faith in God through the process. And I had an incredible recovery through that time. I was able to completely come off testosterone replacement therapy, completely recover my natural system. And through that, my spiritual life deepened so much. I would have the softening effect, through fasts. My mood was so much better, is so much better. And frankly, it's been a net positive across the board. And so since then, I've worked with many men on, either they're currently in the process of coming off testosterone replacement therapy after years, or they've already done so. And many report exactly the same thing of spiritually, they've been able to go deeper since coming off. So the example I'm making here with TRT, the reason I'm saying this is most of the men that I have seen that are commenting things of, oh, well, you think TRT is a sin, or so many men that are basically justifying the use of it and saying they need it. They need it medically, which medically, the people that need it medically actually affects less than 8% of individuals. But the people that say they need it, almost all of them are involved in strength sports, whether that's bodybuilding, powerlifting, some type of strength sport. Guys that are somewhat attached to their identity, with their physique or with their strength, and they don't want to lose that. They don't want to fall behind other men. Almost everybody I've seen that has been on TRT outside of strength sports or has since dropped, the strength sport and moved over to say something like running, or individuals that, haven't been on TRT and aren't even considering it, oftentimes aren't even, attached to strength sports at all. This is something that it's very easy to see justification in people. Now, once again, guys, I want to make the caveat here. I'm not saying TRT is a sin, and I'm not saying it would have been a negative for you spiritually. For me, though, it was not producing good spiritual fruit. It wasn't causing me to have a deeper prayer life, and it wasn't causing me to love people more. And that's the whole point I'm making here. I see comments all the time of, is listening to secular music like heavy metal, is that a sin? Is getting a tattoo a sin? And the reality is, while these things might not necessarily be a sin, guys, I used to love heavy metal back in the day. That was what I lifted to. I would put on a pretty hardcore song and have a killer set of squats. But with that, that never inspired me and doesn't inspire me to pray more. It doesn't inspire me to pray while I'm listening to it. And it definitely doesn't inspire me to pray afterwards. And it definitely doesn't inspire me to, or help me, love people more, or deeper, have a greater capacity to love people. The whole thing is we need to think back to Christ's, greatest two commandments of love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor. And if what we're doing isn't leading us to those two things, while it might inherently not be a sin, if it's not producing good spiritual fruit, we need to be aware and cautious of it. If you are trying to justify something that your flesh wants, something you might like or something that makes you feel good, but it's not inspiring you to pray more, it's not inspiring you to love other people more. Take the heavy metal, for example. I would come out of some lifting sessions after blaring hardcore music, and I would feel a little amped up. I would feel slightly more aggressive, and not in a good way. And yeah, it's not gonna be, a huge sin or anything like that, but it definitely wasn't producing good spiritual fruit. Take my tattoos, for example. I got these all back in the day. Since giving my life to Christ, this is the only one I've gotten here, and it's a cover up. I got a cross to cover up a tattoo that definitely didn't honor God. But other than that, I have no plans now to get more tattoos, and this is personal to me. I'm not saying tattoos would be a negative spiritual thing for you, but for me, I'm not, once again, honoring God with that decision, and it doesn't lead me to, good spiritual fruits. So the point I'm making here is, many times you'll have something that logically can make sense. Take the TRT, for example. It's easy to logically make the argument that it's good for that. But many of the men I've been dealing with, especially around the topic of TRT, but I've even had some people, on consultation calls that, one guy in particular had a huge crossroads of a career decision, basically, and one was the logical move that he was able to make all these arguments for, but frankly, deep down, because of what his gut said, because of what his heart said, he didn't want to do it. And his heart was telling him to go over here. He ended up making this decision, and everything fell together so much better than he could have ever expected, because he trusted his intuition. He trusted his heart. He trusted, listening to God basically with it. And so if you are making justifications in your head of, this isn't a sin, so I can do this, while it might not necessarily be a sin, if it's not producing good spiritual fruit, it's something to be on God for. I've talked in other videos about St. Porphyrios talking about the garden of the soul. And with the example he made of, your soul, you've got one side that is the bad stuff, the thorns. The other side is the good stuff, the flowers. And, you have the ability to water either side. And if you're watering one side, the other side is dying. And so with each action we take, we could either be watering the thorns or watering the flowers. And if we're watering the thorns and the thorns are growing, the flowers are dying. So while something might not necessarily be a sin, if it's not watering the flowers, it might be watering the other side, and you might be taking yourself backwards, with your spiritual growth. Some things, some things you can lose to the grace of God. Not to say it can't come back, but you'll lose that intuition and that spiritual growth and that depth. A good example of this is, people asking, well, is drinking alcohol bad? And then they justify what moderation is. Guys, first off, in today's day and age, everybody's definition of moderation for everything, whether that's food, whether that's drinking, whatever it is, everybody's definition of moderation is not moderation. And so, when people are, asking, is drinking alcohol sin, and saying, well, it's okay in moderation. Well, then you ask them what moderation is, and it's, a drink every night, or, it's only drinking several drinks, one night a week. And once again, if you're doing that, when you get done drinking, are you inspired to then go do your evening prayers? Are you then inspired to, get into the word? Are you inspired, frankly, to love other people more? Once again, the question always needs to come back on is what we're doing. Is it, helping us love God more with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength? And is it helping us love other people more? If what we're doing and what we're trying to justify and cope with, if it's not causing us to love other people more, it's not something we should try to justify. Take the TRT thing, for example, that I justified logically for so long. Since I have stopped, my level of love, not only for God and how I've gone spiritually, but my love for other people has deepened to such a great degree. And I know it's connected. It's not all because I came off TRT, but there is a level of that, because when I dropped the TRT, I dropped this level of pride around my physique and my own ability within my body. And having a kind of a, somewhat of a, when you're using TRT, a lot of times you're doing it and you're coping with some level of you're doing, many people at least are doing it out of a prideful reason. It's, I got to keep up with other men, or I need to be stronger than other men, or I need to look better than other men. And if you drop that, then you can look at other people. And at least that's how it's been in my experience, and many men that I've encountered since I had my journey of coming off. And guys, this is something that I deal with other things. I still to this day, of course, justify many things, and I need to check myself on it. You can even take something that is frankly neutral, something that could be good or it could be bad. Something, say take running, for example. I love running. So during, running, I could get hyper competitive with it. That pride can come out of my ability with that. Or I could spend my running time, saying the Jesus prayer and spending time in prayer, and having gratitude and, having more love inspired for other people, all of that. This is something that, could be something that could be, leading to negative spiritual fruit, or it could lead to positive spiritual fruit. I love riding motorcycles, as you guys know. That's something that I can get obsessive with, and it definitely does take away from, my, me wanting to spend time in prayer. I can very much go down rabbit holes of motorcycles and want to be riding them, working on them, or looking stuff up online on them. And then before I know it, this is all time that I would have used in prayer, or frankly being selfless to other people or whatever. So while, there's other times that, me riding motorcycles, I spend that time in prayer, or it just brings a level of peace and clarity that ends up being a net positive. So the whole point here is this can be around literally anything. But if you have something that you are justifying just because your flesh likes something, if it's not leading to good spiritual fruit, you need to check yourself on, is it potentially leading to negative spiritual fruit? Is it leading you to want to go deeper within your prayer life? Is it inspiring you to love people more? Ultimately comes back down to, like what I said, is it causing us to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor? And if you do not feel more love for other people, if you do not, once again, I brought this example up, but if when you're seeing comments online of people you disagree with, are you getting riled up and want to argue back, or are you able to look at that person with compassion? It's like, are you able to look at someone that's dealing with the sin or with the temptation, and instead of judging them, you have compassion for them, and it inspires you to want to pray for them. Everything we do, we need to check ourselves on, even if it's not inherently wrong, it's not inherently a sin, it might not be good. We need to stop the kind of level of justification. We need to stop being complacent with a lot of things and just accepting things just because it's not inherently a sin. We're called to be more loving than that. And we want to have that relationship with God, and we want to have that love for other people. So just something that, I have been challenging myself with. I hope that, you can, challenge yourself with this too. See if there's anything in your life that, you're justifying, that you probably shouldn't be doing. Let's all, struggle in this together. But I hope this helps some of you guys out there. If it did, please go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Leave any comments or questions down below. All glory to God. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.